Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm going to call to order this regular board meeting of the Perrysburg Board of Education on Tuesday, January 16th, 2024. Mr. Dreyer, roll call, please.
Ms. Rowland Miller.
Here.
Ms. Larimer.
Here.
Ms. Minke. Dr. Ruffert.
Here.
Mr. Bennington.
Here. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And our safety briefing, Perrysburg Schools welcomes you to the Commodore Building, and we thank you for attending tonight's Board of Education meeting. We care about the safety of our students, staff, families, and guests. Please note that there are exits on both the east and west sides of the cafeteria. In case of an emergency, an AED is located just outside the cafeteria doors. You are located at 140 East Indiana Avenue. Thank you for joining us tonight and supporting Perrysburg Schools. Next, we have the agenda in front of us. I'm looking for a motion to adopt the proposed agenda.
So moved.
Ms. Larimer,
Second.
Dr. Ruffert. Mr. Dreyer, roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Dr. Ruffert.
Yes.
Ms. Rowland Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. All right, we're going to move into the superintendent's report, starting with a presentation from someone who I'm sure is probably pretty busy year-round. So, Mr. Hostler.
Yes, thank you. I'll turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Price.
So thank you for this opportunity tonight to present a little bit about enrollment, who we are and what we do. I have the privilege of presenting with Patty Haar. So Patty, I believe, has been in the district approximately 16 years. She's been in the tech department, and she was at Woodland for several years, and now this is year 3 in the enrollment department already. And I had the privilege of working with Patty for several years at Woodland, so we have a long history together, and we work very well together. So Tom, you can go to the next slide. So I'll let her start with her responsibilities, and then we're kind of going to tag team some information for you about enrollment.
Hello, thank you for having me this evening, and Brooke as well. So one of my principal duties is to enroll students through our online student platform, which is Final Forms. Before we used Final Forms, we had a software called InfoSnap, and that was just used only for enrollment. We had other software in the district that we used to update student information, but everyone was kind of in a different place. So we ultimately decided to switch everything to Final Forms so that parents could enroll their students through that system, and then as the years go by, they could update their contact information and sign off on yearly forms throughout the district so we could all be on the same platform. So that has worked out really well for us. But as with all change, we've been busy kind of updating everyone on how to use it, informing families as well that we're new to the system. So that has been a lot of my time in the last year, kind of getting that up and running. Once parents do enroll through Final Forms from our website, the next step is to meet with me in person to turn in all their paperwork. So the things that they would turn in to enroll a student would be their birth certificate. They would show the student's birth certificate. They would show their photo ID, residency, custody, immunizations, report cards. If they have any special ed documents, those types of things would also be provided. After I receive all those documents from the family and make sure everything's in place, then I give families an orientation for the district, which includes giving them school information, building hours, going over the different softwares that are used in the district for things like absence reporting, how grades are displayed in Power School and assignments in Schoology and things like that. So basically giving them the information that they need to be successful as they start their students' career in our district. One of the other things that I do is, as I have all the information, I pass it on to the buildings, and I do what's called a new student email. I attach all the information that was given to me, and in that email, I make sure that I'm mentioning anything that is pertinent to that student, if they have special education needs, if they have English as a second language, anything relevant that the buildings would need to know. And then from there, the buildings will take care of doing the final enrollment piece and establishing the student's start date, contacting the family with that information, and then giving them an a tour of the building, getting them started in the building. Okay, oops, sorry, if you could go back really quick. In the middle there, we have coordinate the yearly spring kindergarten enrollment. That is a pretty big task that starts early every January. This year, enrollment starts for kindergarten January 22nd, and we have approximately 250 to 300 new students yearly. In addition to that, we have preschoolers that are transitioning from our preschool program as well. So that's usually just a very busy time. Because it's so many people enrolling at one time, we do have a form collection event in February, and we have other staff assisting with that as well. But that's kind of a big yearly event, and it's exciting to meet all the new families. One of the last things that I do, I spend a lot of time just answering questions from families and from other secretaries at the buildings about custody residency and just all the different kinds of things that go on in the district and that they might need help with. Okay, as far as challenges, I would say that making sure families have all the appropriate paperwork to enroll is one of the primary challenges with my job. Parents do have to live in our district for the students to attend here, and it needs to be the custodial parents. So I'm in charge of reviewing custody paperwork and making sure that that is correct, it's court stamped, and it's the official paperwork. And then also making sure that families live here. Sometimes people think because they have a Perrysburg address that they can attend school here. Unfortunately, that isn't how it works. You can live in the township, you can live in Middleton Township, and be assigned to another school district. So part of what I have to do is vet the address and make sure that the assigned district for that address is Perrysburg Schools.
One of the other challenges is custodial questions and concerns. So in the state of Ohio, if parents are not married at the time the child was born, the custody defaults to the mother. And oftentimes there's families, because it's their first time enrolling, let's say a kindergartner in school, they don't realize that. And so it may be a situation where you have a father working to enroll his son, but the parents were never married. So we help navigate and kind of direct them to the Wood County courts with how to proceed to get those custodial rights for the child. And there are a lot of custodial agreements that are very lengthy and very specific with who can pick up the kid on which days, what that parenting schedule might be. There's also some agreements that have no contact orders for certain individuals. So we really look through those and make sure we're getting that information to the building. We often call families with questions to clarify those things. We really want to make sure we're giving the correct information to the building to start out everyone on the same page, but that's also a challenge.
As I mentioned before, there is a high volume of enrollments during the spring and into the summer, and what happens is we wind up working in 2 school years simultaneously. We're still enrolling for the current school year, but then we also have enrollment opening for our kindergartners in January, and then for the rest of the students in grades 1 through 12 in early April. So there's a lot going on. I guess if I had a tax season, it would probably be, that would be the time range that it would be.
And international and out-of-state enrollments also pose a challenge at times, particularly some of the international enrollments. The school year for different countries runs on a different schedule. Additionally, transcripts that are in another language we need to get translated to make sure we're placing students in the right courses and in the right grade. So oftentimes we pull together an enrollment review team with counselors, ELL teachers, principals from a building to help review the information we've collected to make sure we get that placement correct.
Another challenge that is involved with our kindergarten enrollments is making sure that once everyone is enrolled, I have to place them into the correct building, elementary building, based on their address. So I have to distribute the files to the schools and share the student information with them, and then I have to start managing lists of, at least in the past, it was who wanted all day, who wanted half day, and making sure we did not go over our allotted numbers for each of the buildings. And then also manage wait lists if we had more students interested than we could accommodate at that time, or if we have an overflow building for ADK monitoring their numbers. So I'm excited that I maybe won't quite have to do it quite that way for next year. So.
Yes, no one is more thrilled that we're able to, because of the fair funding formula, able to move to ADK for all than the enrollment department and possibly the treasurer's department. So we are very glad that we're able to provide that opportunity for our family. Another particular challenge just with our growth is assisting in keeping elementary class sizes balanced. So we really look to make a good faith effort to keep those class sizes 25 or fewer. So if there are classes that are getting up over that limit, when a new student comes into the district, we work with Courtney Parr to see if there's the ability to transfer that student to a building where those class sizes are lower. And so it doesn't always work, but we do make that effort to try to make sure we're keeping those class sizes consistently 25 or fewer across the district. We work hard to look at that. So now we're moving on to the next one for some accomplishments.
So I consider myself sort of an ambassador for the school district. I need to really make sure that I'm providing excellent customer service for our families coming in, and a big part of that is making them feel welcome. I have a large United States map and then a world map on the wall of my office, and I have the kids place a pin from the location that they came from, and they get a big kick out of that. It makes them feel like they're not the only person coming in who's new, and it's really fun to see where everyone is coming from. Part of that is I also make sure to give people good information about the school district. I have some summary sheets I've provided for families. You might have a family coming in with the students in 4 different buildings. So I've created some materials that I provide families, and again, I do that overview of the different softwares and make sure that they understand what the next step is for them as far as their students starting school and what they can expect. So, and I think people appreciate that because then they feel kind of invested in the process and they feel like they're being taken care of.
Another big accomplishment, and this is kudos to Patty, is really the rollout of Final Forms, having a consistent platform for enrollment and then the same platform that can be used all the way through graduation for back to school forms is really a nice feature. Additionally, that platform gives parents the ability to upload any document changes that can go straight into that system and then are vetted by secretaries before they're pushed into our student information system. So it really does eliminate that paper form and things getting lost with faxing or I send it to this building. Having that single sign-on platform is really going to assist with that.
One of the great features in Final Forms is much like for a school physical, when it's going to expire, parents receive an automatic notice at different points, 60 days, 30 days, 15 days. So they have an opportunity to get those physicals updated, and they can also upload them right into the system so the school has them. Well, that similar process can be used for residency, which is not something we had the ability to do before. If we wanted to check on residency, it kind of required a little sifting through of data and finding those people and doing the reminders manually. With Final Forms, we can set a countdown calendar or feature that we can put the expiration date of the lease or whatever the document is, and then that will automatically start reminding the parent to get that updated when it's time. And then if they don't see those reminders, then we can follow up personally, but at least we know that they have been receiving a few reminders and then they can upload the items themselves. So that really is a time saver.
And one of the last accomplishments we wanted to highlight is just coordination with that building enrollment team. So we work really closely with the Pupil Services Department, Special Education, ELL, and look at what those needs are of the students coming in and making sure the right people that need to support that family are in the loop with what those needs might be. So there's a lot of coordination with the different departments to make sure we're starting out families on the right foot. Okay. Move forward, Tom. All right, so we wanted just to give you a quick little snapshot. I know throughout a lot of presentations, we've shown you kind of that snowball effect or the enrollment trend line, which we all know is increasing. But we wanted to just give a little bit different look to the enrollment department and thought it might be helpful or interesting to provide a pie chart of the number of total enrollments processed. This isn't a net gain. The net gain from May of 22 to May of 23 is around 112 students, but the number of enrollments processed, this does not count spring kindergarten registration, processed basically from the summer to the start of that next year, there were 424 new enrollments processed in 2022-23. And you can see where those students are coming from. You know, a little over half are coming from Ohio public and private schools, but we do have 37% of those enrollments were out of state or international. And then we had another, a little over 5% of students coming off homeschool and coming back to the district. So Tom, if you can go to the next one. So Patty's done a great job. I'll let her talk a little bit about this slide.
So I thought it would just be fun as my map gets more full from all the other different states and countries. Where are these kids coming from? So oddly enough, this year or last year we have almost 14% coming from Florida. I thought we Ohioans moved to Florida, but apparently that's not the case necessarily. Almost 11% from Michigan. Then we also have California and Virginia and Tennessee are kind of the highest numbers, and then followed around by a few other states. But just interesting that those are the locations they're coming from. And then again, internationally, this has been fascinating to just watch. We have a number of companies that bring in, that are not located in Perrysburg, but that bring in people from all over the world to work in their locations. And in 22-23, we had 13.5% come from Japan, almost 11% from Mexico, Singapore at 8%, Pakistan at 8%, and Malaysia at 8%, and then a bunch of other countries past that, but just very interesting stuff.
So then, as of January 12th, this is where we're at for the current year. So again, this doesn't count spring registration for kindergarten. It basically counts from the summer on. So already this year, we've processed 328 new student enrollments to the district. Again, that's not the net. The net's around 40 from like the May report till now. And actually, if you just look at building totals, we're actually up closer to 50. That's a net total, but 328 total processed enrollments. And again, now this year so far, we're around 60% public and private, and close to 37% international, and around 2% so far this year coming back from homeschool. So Tom, if you go to the next slide. So this just, again, similar to what Patty went over on the other slides, just shows for the current school year up through January 12th, kind of where students are coming from. So you can kind of see those numbers there. The presentation's also uploaded to the board agenda as well. So Tom, you can go ahead. So any questions for enrollment?
No, this is very fascinating. I appreciate the information that you gave out about building the relationships with new families, because it can be overwhelming. You know, and especially with the information that you give about what forms they're going to use or what's next computer system or something like that, that's great. And I also, as a mom of 2 graduates who used to have to do the paper forms and changed it every year because for some reason it never got fixed, I loved the implementation of final forms, and I think that was a great addition to the enrollment process.
Well, this is really cool. Patty, is there anything that you feel you need that you want to change or add to your department at this particular point to make it work even better?
No, not at this point. I really love working with Brooke. Anytime I have a question or a concern, I can go to her, and she helps. She gives me quick answers. Usually my questions are about custody or sometimes the finer points of residency, but anything I need help with, she has a quick answer, or she'll get the answer for me. So I do think switching to final forms has been really helpful in a lot of different ways, and just as I get more proficient with my role, I think I'm being a little bit more efficient each year, but I really enjoy meeting all the families, and it's really fun to meet people from all across the country and the world. And they're all coming here for our school district.
Right. This was interesting because I read your data and your Excel sheets that you send to us every month, and I kind of focused in on that. This was very enlightening about how you actually touch all these people and greet them and everything. You really are. You're an ambassador. You're the first touch into the district that they have. I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, you must be really, really good at what you do, given the growth in the enrollment. You're not you must have a great way of being and able to make those
Baptism by
families
fire.
feel comfortable when you're coming in. I was interested about the residency expiration process, probably more specifically. How often are those checks done? Is that continuous? Is it annually?
So typically, the things that require residency checks are the types of residency that have an expiration. So it's leases, so apartment leases that are set for a certain amount of time, or residency affidavits. So it's people who are living with a Perrysburg resident. There's a particular form that has to be notarized and completed and filed. and those have a 1-year expiration from the date that they're signed. So with final forms, we're able to put in, when someone enrolls and they have that type of residency, we're able to put in that countdown clock right at enrollment, so that they automatically get those notices when those things expire. If you own a home, typically that doesn't expire, but there are checks then on the auditor's website that we can do if there's a question.
Okay, thank you. So it's data driven, it's
Yep.
date certain?
Yes, correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, very good. Again, like Ms. Larimer said, I appreciate the timing of the presentation. Opened up the January report and saw 11 new students, I believe, just in the month of December. And that just struck me. It was like, wow, 11 in the month of December seemed high. I guess the thought that hit me was like, we're still doing enrollments? So thank you for talking about when your tax season is. That's something that I can relate to.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, the thing that makes me most uncomfortable annually, but School Board Appreciation Month. So
Sure.
go ahead, Mr. Hostler.
Yeah, thank you. And this January marks the annual School Board Appreciation Month, and we wanted to take a moment to recognize the school board and show our appreciation for all the hard work that you do and the efforts that go into being a member of the school board. I know that members here, we're very fortunate, members past and present have taken very seriously their responsibilities and have worked very hard to provide that link between the community and the school district. And we know that that's not always an easy role to play. And we know that it takes a special kind of person to raise their hand to say, I would like to serve on the school board and run and go through that process. So we're very grateful that you all chose to do that. I think it's getting more and more important to have people that are open-minded and want to learn, and equally important, more importantly, be able to offer their input and help guide the district in the way that the community sees fit. So we're grateful for that. We also know that you have meetings and you have schedules and committees and other events that you have to attend, and you have those blocked out, and your family life rotates around those. So we're also grateful for your family's sacrifices, because there are times where things are happening and you can't do that thing that you want to do, or time away from your special furry family and the challenges that makes. So we also recognize too that once you become a board member, it's very hard to remove that hat. And whether you're in the church parking lot or you're in aisle 12 of Churchill's or wherever you go, people know who you are, what you do, and they tap you on the shoulder and say, do you have a minute? Which rarely actually takes a minute. So being out there and being accessible, we're just very grateful for all the work that you do and continue to do for our students. So we've got a great team, and we want to work hard to make sure that you have all that you need to continue your service successfully. So I'm sure Randy would like to say, as a former school board member, I'm sure he'd like to say a few things.
Well, again, thank you for serving. I can tell you, dialed back the clock 20 years when I first stepped on the school board, and you don't know what you don't know, right? Laura knew better, and she still joined us, and Sue and Eric have served multiple terms, and I really do greatly appreciate it. And people in the public generally don't understand, because they see this, and I think that's what the job is, and we know it's a lot more than that, and it's greatly appreciated. I personally appreciate each and every one of you and the questions I get, and Tom and I serve the 5 of you in this district, and I'm proud to do so, and you got me for 5 more years, so we're stuck together, so like it or not. Sorry, Laura.
So we do have at your seats just a small token of our appreciation, some personalized letters and notes to board members thanking you for your service, And I do hope you take time to kind of review those, and ranging from staff who certainly understand the role to students who have different ideas as to what that role may be. And I think the letters are very symbolic of, in one way, there is the seriousness of the issues that this board faces, from financial stewardship to decisions that ultimately affect individuals' lives in a significant way at times. But also never losing sight of the fact that, it's about the students in the classroom. And what we do and how we do it is always focus on, keeping that in the forefront. So I think these are symbolic of that and that work. We would like to take a picture of all of you and for just to commemorate the moment. And I know Rachel will make her way down here and direct you if you could indulge us. So we would appreciate that. So
I'll remind my fellow board members and the new ones too, this picture gets used like quite a bit, so smile really well. It'll be surprised how often it'll pop up over the next 2 years. So, sure.
So.
Are we taking our letters with us? All right.
Where would we like to go? In front of the flag? Okay, back to the wall.
Oh, thank you.
One day a year, I put a tie on. Great, you Photoshop all of that. Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, make us look 10 years younger, turn out later.
Yeah, I don't gauge it by age anymore, I gauge it by weight. That was 30 pounds ago.
Blame the school board.
Well, Mr. Hosser, Mr. Drury, thank you very much for those kind words. As I've said in the past, you always, I often hear this is a thankless job, and I don't find it that way. I find it very rewarding. So thank you for that acknowledgement. Personally, this is one of my favorite things to do during the year. Tonight, I'll go home and I'll go through all of this, and I'll put it in a big box, a box that's getting bigger of the ones that I've received during my time here. And it's a box that, when it does feel a little bit more thankless than usual, pull that box out and reminds myself why we do this. So, thank you very much.
Agreed. Thank you.
Okay, great. Enough of that. Mr. Hosser, next, the superintendent report.
Sure, thank you. Periodically, this time of year, for reasons that are pretty apparent, we wanted to provide a little bit of background on the weather safety update in terms of what goes into some of the decisions that we make relative to weather decisions, to have school, to cancel, to delay. And so we wanted to kind of walk the board and community through that process. So we do send out a letter periodically, usually once a year, right around this time, kind of outlining many of the tenets that are in this presentation, because I think folks sometimes have an understanding of these decisions, and while we do sometimes joke about them, I think it's also important to know the seriousness and the process that goes into making those decisions, which really focus on the student safety and what we do. So as the temperatures begin to fall, and they've fallen flat, we like to review what we do. And on any given day, any given decision, we receive feedback in a variety of ways, which is always interesting. The only thing that we can count on is no matter what decision we make, we will be upsetting certain segments of our students, our families, staff, and the community in general. So in some ways, it gives you a sense of freedom, because no matter what decision you make, you'll have people in general not happy or question it. And so it gives you that freedom to really make the decision that is in the best interest given those moments and what kind of conditions you're dealing with. So checking out the roads, there's kind of a process that we follow, and that occurs when there is fog, ice, or snow, or other types of weather-related issues. So the transportation director and myself personally check the roads each time that there is an event. And we oftentimes begin our day at 4 a.m. with a phone call from Perrysburg Township Dispatch, who says, hey, our evening officers or overnight officers are reporting conditions are changing, and we wanted you to be aware of that. And we're very grateful for that, because there are those days, when we know there's a weather event coming, we set our alarms and we can answer it on the first ring because we're up and getting ready. But there are those instances, and sometimes it's in late February, early March, where, the snow melts and then it freezes, the temperature dips a couple more degrees, and then the roads ice over, and you're not anticipating. That's not in the forecast. So we're very grateful for those types of situations. We have 28 square miles, so we're not the largest district, but we're not very small. So we have a lot of terrain to cover in that time of checking the roads. And the types of terrain we cover varies greatly. When you think about, we have Middleton Township and how rural it is kind of in that southwest corner. We have Perrysburg Township to the south and to the east of the district, and then we have the city. And each has their own way and philosophy of how to address and clean the roads when it comes to snow and ice. So we're often, held, holding our breaths, waiting to see, when we encounter those snow plows, because that is an important part of that decision and how well the crews work. And generally speaking, the decision to delay has to be made around 6 a.m. And so folks who get out and look out their window at 11 a.m. See the conditions at that moment in time, but when we have to make the decisions at 6 or 8 a.m., depending if there's a 2-hour delay, those conditions change throughout the day. And we understand that, when we have forecasts, and sometimes they're not always reliable, we also have to factor getting kids home safely. So, and that's one of those times where sometimes you get it right and you look like a genius. And there's other times where, to this day, I still get people that kind of poke me about, remember that time when you canceled because of the rain, because of the 11 inches of snow that was supposed to fall, and it just rained. But the one thing, delaying students in the morning is great. I can tell you that sending students home early is something that usually superintendents only do once in their career, because that's all it takes to say, we'll never do this again. Because every elementary student has to be accounted for and handed off to a parent or a guardian. The phone calls that everyone has to make sure that there's someone to receive that student is quite stressful. And like I said, we do look at the forecast and what it's going to do later in the day. Friday, we had some weather roll in late, and buses were running 20 to 40 minutes late because of that. And parents get nervous, and so we do the best we can to communicate. And transportation does a phenomenal job of sharing with parents through different apps when the buses are not running on time. Students are the number one priority when we begin to look at these decisions. I disappoint teachers and staff members who also, campaign for snow days. We don't make the decisions for necessarily the staff members. We make it for the students. And that's our responsibility. So we have hundreds of teenage drivers that are navigating the road Many of them, for the very first time, are experiencing winter weather. And as much as parents prepare students for all those conditions, sometimes it is that drive in on that morning that is the first time that they've had an opportunity to actually drive in Ohio weather. You know, the visibility with fog is a significant challenge with safety for walkers and drivers alike. You know, winds and drifting, the type of snow that falls, all those things can make a huge difference in whether or not we are able to go on time. And temperature and wind chill and buses and how the road crews are actually working. And, you know, people also leave their, you know, heated garage, drive down the road, get on the main roads, get on another main road, and it's all clear. But wherever there is a family with a child that's attending Perrysburg schools, you know, they're either getting their child here or we're getting a bus out there. And so some of those roads aren't traveled. And to get to those roads, you're traveling roads that aren't traveled often. And not all of our students live on main roads, and our buses do a great job of traveling through a wide variety of neighborhoods and streets. And also, the way people park on those streets can bring a whole nother challenge. So we have roads that are city roads and sidewalks, and within a mile or two, we have steep ditches. So there's a huge diversity to that. And, you know, it's interesting, I saw it this morning where, and you've probably seen it too, where a salt truck will go into an intersection and do a couple of, you know, circles because those intersections are very dangerous places. Cars have to be able to stop and get through the intersection safely. Our school buses are rolling intersections. We don't have the luxury of having a salt truck do donuts, you know, to salt every single one of our stops. So that is something that we look at when we begin to test the roads, is that rolling intersection concept. So the snow-packed, ice-covered roads can become slick, making it really challenging to stop. And you think about getting a vehicle going, how long it takes, or stopping a vehicle as students are crossing to load the bus, and that's something that we take very seriously. The wind chill is something that we look at very closely, and the National Weather Service has a wind chill chart, and I'll share that with you shortly, to take a look at and determining that difference between the bitter cold, which is uncomfortable, and like this morning it was bitterly cold, and what is a hazard. And, you know, being out in that element could cause some damage to students, or, you know, getting, you know, while waiting for the bus or walking to school. And we're very fortunate because when it comes to wind chill, you know, the time students are waiting for buses and on the bus isn't very long. Our attendance walk areas in Ohio can be up to 2 miles. We don't have any that are more than a mile, so someone walking can get to school within typically 20 minutes at the most. And we're fortunate that the majority of our families children have access to a hat and gloves and boots and coats. Now, as a father of 4, I can't guarantee the children will always wear those items when it is cold, but oftentimes our families have that, or the ability to carpool or get them in a car to get them there. But not every school district has the majority of their students who have that. So that bitterly cold in those districts where students are, you know, don't have hats and gloves and boots, that bitterly cold can be a health hazard. So I'm speaking for Perrysburg, and I think that's the other important thing about this, is every school district has a unique challenge. Ottawa Hills, for example, does not have buses. And so that changes their, you know, and the square miles of Ottawa Hills is very, very small. So that changes their equation versus a district like Eastwood or Anthony Wayne, which has, you know, over 150 square miles and, you know, has a variety of roads. Generally speaking, when we look at wind chills, there's this chart that sometimes, you know, people ask, especially right now, like, okay, well, where is that line? And roughly it's a combination of the air temperature and the wind. And those two combinations, if you get between 15 and 18 degrees below zero, that puts you into that category where frostbite after 30 minutes of exposure occurs. So when you think about that student who's walking for 20 minutes, if that is a 30-minute window, you're really beginning to push up against that time. Or if you're waiting for that bus and you get out there early and the buses are running late that morning, that 15 minutes, 20, 25 minutes, all of a sudden can be a health hazard. We don't cancel because it is, bitterly cold and kids are uncomfortable. We cancel because there could be some health risks to that. And so that is kind of where we draw the line. So if it is like this, this morning, the temperature was between 5 and 10 degrees, and and then with the wind, it was right around 5 or 6 degrees. So this morning, the issue was not the cold temperatures. The issue was the roads and the ice and what we were facing there, because we know the salt takes longer to work in the colder temperatures, if at all. And we also understand that when other cars are out there driving, it warms up the road. When the sun comes out, it warms up the road, and that can help us. But sometimes it's not within that window that we need to make that decision. There's constant things that happen. I know everybody focuses on, the weather and travel conditions Monday through Friday, in the mornings especially. But we also understand that there's evening trips. On Friday, the last conversation I had around 6:30 was we had a bowling team that went right after school to Bowling Green for competition. The snow got very heavy and there was a lot of weather. And so monitoring how those kids are getting back and safely and what time do we need to pull them from that event? Those conversations are with the athletic director, the coach, the bus driver, transportation, myself, and we work on those. We have out-of-town events too. So not only are we looking at what we're experiencing here, but when we have hockey teams our hockey team travels to Cleveland, we need to know what the weather is there and what we can anticipate. So, and out-of-town contests. So we've heard some things that, today kids are softer than they used to be, or were softer than what they were back in old times. And, is there more attention with the media, with weather events where, 5 days ahead, they're beginning to talk about this weather event. And then ultimately in Toledo, in Northwest Ohio, Perrysburg, it seems like the weather doesn't always hit that mark. And I'm grateful, I'm not complaining about that. But just for fun, we went back to 1985, the graduating class of 85, think Back to the Future, Marty McFly. And we pulled Perrysburg's record. So in 1985, 84-85, there were 5 days canceled due to weather. And then the year before was 4, 1, and then 6. So more snow and weather perhaps back in the 80s than today. And I think that, with 2014 was the last really difficult, challenging weather year, we've been pretty close to what people have experienced in the past, actually. So as we get into the, thoughts with this, we live in Northwest Ohio. Mm-hmm. It snows. And we're going to deal with winter weather. And we can't cancel school every time it gets cold and every time it snows. So that's kind of the attitude that we go in. It is a tremendous amount of responsibility to make those decisions. And it's very important for me personally to be, on the road, looking at and evaluating the streets, because heaven forbid something were to happen, I wanted to make sure that my experience of being a superintendent is, and seeing the different kinds of roads and conditions, I want to know that I made the best decision I could with the information that we had. So the greatest fear is on those questionable mornings, and some mornings at 10 o'clock you say, yeah, that probably should have delayed, or probably should have. It's an imperfect science. And then there's others that are like, yeah, we would have been okay today. But again, in that moment, with the information we have, it makes it really challenging at that time. And, you know, we have to look the community members in the eye and justify that decision, and we try to do that. So I thought it would be interesting because we actually had this lined up before today. So I thought we would kind of take you through a case study, and that was the weather today. So today we did have a cancellation. I do tweet out when that decision is made, and we'll kind of get through. And that was the tweet that went out. My daughter set up my Twitter account and used that picture, and I don't know exactly how to change it. So I know people comment about that, but that was not me. That was actually her. So I need to talk to her about updating that. But at any rate, I do take pictures while out there because, you know, people don't see what I see, and I want them to at least get a glimpse of what it looks like at the time of that decision. And I think that's been helpful in some cases. I did have a principal of a high school in a neighboring district that said, you have a series of pictures that you download, and you're in bed, and you just cycle through them. So I knew where he lived, and on the way to check the roads, one morning I'd stop in front of his house and took a picture of the road conditions. Didn't tell anyone, and I got a text from him later that day when he realized that was his house. He did say touche. So we canceled today, which is Tuesday, January 16th. So on Monday, January 15th at 6:41 p.m., this is an actual test from Courtney Parr, transportation director, who said, I really should have been a meteorologist because things were starting to happen, schools were starting to delay. So yesterday at 7:34 p.m., this is the list of schools that were beginning to delay or close, and that list began to grow. So this is one of like 4 pages. And so conversations begin, obviously, you know, Courtney texting me saying, hey, you know, what's going on? You know, and we looked at the temperatures, and at that point in time, it was going to be a cold morning. And that's what we were banking on while we did not delay, because we felt that morning the roads are clear, our lots were clear from Friday, and we should be in pretty good shape. So at 4 a.m., I did receive a call from the township. Wasn't anticipated. I had my alarm set, but not for 4 a.m. And the dispatcher called to share that the officers said, you know, the roads are getting pretty icy. You might want to take a look. So at 4:18, I texted Courtney. Excuse the grammar, but it was 4:18. So got a call from the townships about the roads getting slick, heading out to check them shortly. She said, I'm heading out in 10 minutes. We're all good with the buses all started, however, new snow throwing a wrench into the morning. So she was already aware at 4:18 that our buses were set to go. And we know that this new weather system that was coming through was creating some challenges. At 4:22, did a screen capture of the weather. And for Perrysburg, the temperature, it was 10 degrees. It feels like -5. Okay, not that wind chill threshold of -15 or 18, but a cold morning, but one that is not unsafe for us and our students. So we went down to say, okay, it's time to, you know, let's take a look at the icy road conditions, because we've now kind of, based on that temperature, we're okay with the wind chill. So between 4:22 to 5 o'clock, 5:30, you begin to check the roads. So we have kind of a route between Courtney and I where she takes one side of the district, I take the other. I start in the furthest section, the southwest corner, and I make my way into the city. And it's a combination of pulling into neighborhoods and taking a look at the neighborhood streets. So that upper left-hand picture is a neighborhood street. Looking at the sidewalks, because we have many students that walk, you know, to the bus stop or to the school. So that's also important, you know, because if the sidewalks are impassable, then they're going to be forced to go out into the streets and walk, and that's something that we take a look at. So between, and these are actual from the cell phone, but starting at 5:15, checked in again with Courtney. hands-free, so I'm not dialing while checking the roads. Jason Bloomer is our maintenance director. And so he plays an important role because he had his crew in early to make sure that the ice and the lots were cleared. So a conversation to him to say, how are we doing? How do the lots look? Because if you get the kids there and you can't get them into the building because the lots aren't clear, that can be another challenge. That is an area that we do worry about with our staff, getting them in and out of our buildings safely. And so we need to make sure, so that conversation happens every time. And seeing how that progress. They have a schedule with the crew that they do with which buildings they do in kind of a sequence. And so if you're constantly under in that 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. window, if they're getting hit with a lot of snow, they're not always able to move on to the next building because they're having to go back and take care of that first building that's going to open. So at that last conversation with Courtney at 5:34, beginning to work my way into into town. That of the 4 pictures here, the one in the upper right-hand corner it's a great visual just down the road from HPI. But you can see where the road is, how it's covered with ice, the wind kind of going across the road, which makes it very slippery. And then you have those open ditches right there. So just a reminder of what that looks like. And then as we're getting into town, you can see the condition of the roads, and then downtown Perrysburg. And the one in the bottom right-hand corner was actually River Road. And so that one remained pretty tricky with the ups and downs and twists and turns and drives. So that's when we spend some time. So at that point in time, the decision to say, okay, we're going to go ahead and cancel at 5:49. So all those things go into those decisions because, as you can see in these pictures, it is snowing while we're checking the roads. So at 5:49, notified Kit Veller then Rachel to close schools. Kit's role is to call television stations to let them know. There's a special code, secret handshake that goes on. I don't even know what it is. And then Rachel sends out the call, text, and emails to all families, and posts to social media, the websites, and Schoology. Next, which was very important to me, was texting Randy at 5:52 a.m. Saying, hey, we just closed schools, roads are conditions, temp wasn't the issue, take time, be careful. So looking out for Randy.
I assume he's already in his office when he gets that text at 5:52.
Yes. A little bit later on in the day, 10:44, Principal Cookson, there's some after-school events and activities. Do we have them? Do we cancel them? That's something that, principals get those questions. We have this practice or this rehearsal. And that's something that we don't have that rule where if we cancel because of the weather conditions at 6 a.m., that everything for the rest of the day is canceled. Because if we cancel for fog, which has happened, by 10 a.m., it's sunny out. And it doesn't make sense to have to reschedule games, inconvenience families. So we do evaluate and begin to have those conversations at 11:31. Chuck Jaco texted Aaron and I, and just the portion of it which got into we're relying on other school districts to tell us whether those events that they're hosting with our student athletes are going to take place or not. So there's conversations about that. And of course, that brings us to Wednesday's forecast to see if it starts all over again. So that kind of gives you in real time what happens, how it happens, and the one thing, because I didn't want to get voted off the survivor island of superintendents, there is communication that goes on between superintendents. I did not put any of those in here because, again, they would probably not include me. So it's helpful to know there's all these codes, and I got a text from a pretty notable TV personality, actually 2 of them, but this one said, why don't you cancel now? Because if you do this, then this district and this district will automatically do it. And there's all these codes that kids have, like, well, if if Anthony Wayne cancels, then that means this is going to happen and this is going to happen, or vice versa. And there isn't any of that. All of our districts are very different. We all share some common programming with Penta and others. Rossford, for example, we transport private school students together, so it's good to know what they're doing so we can make the appropriate adjustments. But at the end of the day, Maumee is a very different school district in terms of the roads and conditions that they experience than Perrysburg, even though we're across the river. And Eastwood, which borders us, looks very different than Perrysburg. So we don't point fingers at each other and, and that kind of a thing. So it's, tomorrow, looking at the weather and what that could be. I know sitting here, there's a handful of text messages that have come in from other school districts. So I think, people are beginning to look at that and make those decisions. We do understand the challenges that parents have with, finding, what's going to happen tomorrow. I think it's a recent phenomena. Someone asked me how things have changed in over the years. I do think we're right now in a mode where people really want the decisions to be made in advance and not waiting to morning. And that's just really challenging because, like, this morning is a great example. It wasn't the cold. It was the conditions of the roads. So tomorrow is going to go, potentially could be colder. So do you just pick a meteorologist and say, we're going with that one, and they're predicting -20, and then tomorrow morning, whatever front moves through, or it doesn't hit, or it moves in very quickly and it's gone, and it's 8 degrees and with 5-mile-an-hour winds, and we're canceled for the day. So, which one do you pick? Which one do you say we're going to base this huge decision on this? And it impacts families and loss of work and, getting kids across town. It also affects our staff in some cases with loss of work, and, people rely on that. So it's all those factors, and try and just, at the end of the day, do the best that we can. And so with that, just a thank you to our bus drivers who do a tremendous amount of they're professional. It's the safest mode of transportation to get your children to and from school. The custodians who are there early, throwing salt, even on a meeting like tonight where, we have someone who's taking care of the public that's here, making sure, thank you, that the sidewalks are clear, and we have events going on all the time, and they're always looking out for our folks, maintenance that are there, the operations administrators. Courtney's getting up before 4 o'clock. Jason is already here at 4 o'clock with some guys working on lots. So, and then we have a snow crew that pulls from different folks. So, so we value everybody, and certainly a special thank you, because it helps me make that decision knowing we have such great drivers and trusted hands. So that's a little bit about the weather, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it more tomorrow. So, but just wanted to share a little bit about that decision and how it works. And I thought, well, why all this information is right here? It might be interesting just to walk you through it in real time. So,
That was pretty cool.
yeah.
Any comments or questions for Mr. Hostler?
I have a question. Sorry about that. I do have a question. Do we have a hard core mark off for temperature-wise? I mean, I know we always talk about the roads, and I
Yeah.
mean, it's pretty easy to see yes or no whether school's going to be closed from that, especially in the outlying areas. But, I know within town we have quite a few walkers, and like you said, they could be walking up to a mile. So,
Yeah, I don't think there is it's like, again, it's, -15, is that the hard? Is it -14? Is it, so some of those things at the moment of the decision, this chart is kind of that line. You can see it kind of float through between at -10 with 5-mile-an-hour winds, it's between -16, 22. But generally speaking, if you're right on that edge, which is right about, -15 degrees, that's really where it begins to be a concern. So, according to NOAA and the National Weather Service, you can see that the first of you have the light blue, which is just warm, and then you have that another blue, which is frostbite times. If you're out there exposed for 30 minutes, that's when you can see frostbite begin to happen. As you get into the 10 minutes, minus 33, I mean, that's definitely no go. But like I said, this morning was minus 5 to the One Weather app that I looked and did a screen capture at 4. Minus 5, minus 8. It's bitterly cold, but it's not in that threshold. So 15 to 18. And again, it depends on when you're looking at it, kind of where the temperature trend is going. Is the temperature rising? Because in another half hour, are we going to be out of that zone? So, generally it is, that, 15, 16 degrees, 14 degrees, it is in that range where we start to say that's an issue. Buses begin to behave a little bit differently too. So doors sometimes malfunction in the cold, just like your cars. When you're thinking about, well, I got in my car, I park it outside, all of our buses are outside, and I tried to roll down the window and I couldn't, it was frozen. Well, imagine if that's your door during a route and a child can't get on. So air brakes underneath the bus, it sits up high for safety purposes. But also your brake line and some of the other things that are underneath there run the whole way to the bus, to the back, and they're exposed and they get cold. So we do know that there's limitations with the bus, and usually right around that minus 15 degree mark is when we start to worry about the mechanicals. So. Yeah.
Tom, this might be a James question, but do our propane buses have any issues different than our diesel or gas buses? I saw a news report today, I found it funny, wherever maybe it was in Iowa, because everybody's talking about Iowa right now, and all these people could not get their EVs to charge, and all the hysteria going on because no EVs were charging. And it made me wonder then about our buses, because I thought that the reason why we were canceling, or at least delaying today, would have been to give the buses a chance to have some better weather, but it didn't warm up very much. So is there a difference between the buses?
James could give kind of the probably more scientific response. We do have different blends of diesel, fuel that I know there's some additives that you put in because diesel fuel behaves differently in the cold. And so there's some things that you can do, plugging in buses to keep them warm, the engine blocks and keeping that fuel warm, or with the additives are things that we do with the diesels. I've not had I don't think there are any different things that we have to do with the propane buses with the fuel.
In fact, Tom,
yeah.
propane buses are the benefit, you don't have to block heater.
Yeah.
They start up, they warm up a lot faster. Yeah. Propane buses are a gasoline engine, except with the fuel for propane. So they run hotter, and having dealt with them for quite a long time now, that we like them for that reason. You don't have to plug them in at night, for example.
Well, that's good to know.
Mr. Hostler, since this has come up recently, is this the chart that's also used for recess decisions?
Recess, I think, so for recess, they don't wait until it's minus 15. So they do have a cutoff, and I knew they do look at a combination of wind chill and temperature. So I think this is it, in addition to rain. So they do have an agreement between all the buildings of when that should come in. So yeah, it is the same chart that they use
Not the same
and
point,
base that on.
but
Yeah. So no, thank you.
So thank you for the detailed play-by-play.
Yep.
Working in a school district for 29 years and the daughter of a dad who used to have to make that call way back in the day. And we lived in Jerusalem Township. So imagine that, out by Lake Erie. So, you know, he used to drive the road. So this was very interesting to see, and I think it's going to be helpful for people. You know, you were talking about the square district, or square miles of school districts, and of course, there's a chart for that on ODE. And it's interesting. It's like you realize Perrysburg's kind of small, but Maumee is only 9 square miles, Perrysburg's 28. And when you talk about that, and BG is 118 square miles, and you know the road conditions are different. I mean, I live in a subdivision over by Costco. They're always plowed, it's always clean, all the neighbors do the sidewalks, but you get out, you know, even we didn't take Lucas down to an activity in Bowling Green over the weekend because of the open fields. If you've never driven down there when that wind's blowing, that snow and
That's
it's crazy, and people don't understand, I think, a lot of the road conditions if they don't do that. And so this was very helpful, and I appreciate the pictures because, you know, they're not as like all subdivisions, and, you know, especially if you go through your subdivision and it's been very cold, but when they plow the snow, you know, the crosswalks and the ramps are always iced over, and it's up to neighbors to shovel that out, and people don't always do that. And I see kids in the street instead of, you know, walking on the sidewalk. So thank you for taking all that into consideration. And also, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's always a parent's prerogative to call somebody off from school if they don't feel their child should be going because of weather or whatever.
Yeah.
So they always have that option if they don't agree with your decision as well.
Yeah.
So.
And we get feedback, and you know,
I'm sure
we had a
you
good feedback today. Someone said, you know, just keep in mind that the swim team works out at, you know, kids are leaving at 5:45 a.m. And we make, you know, you see the process that we use to make those decisions, especially when, you know, if the snow had fallen and it was 3 a.m. and it had moved on, that decision comes a little earlier. When it's in the middle of that system, it's a little bit delayed. And the last couple of weather issues we've had have been that way. But so it's good to hear that. I remember one of the first time, and you think about when you're out in the country, you're driving, and so it's like, well, what do you do when you drive around? And there's no like class that you take to teach you like what to do. And so, you know, one of the things that I've done is I'll be driving down, you know, a road, and I'll pick out a mailbox that's at the corner, and I'll say, okay, that's a student. And then, you know, driving the appropriate speed for the conditions, I will stop to see if I can, you know, replicate what a bus does, except a few tons less. And you know, am I going to slide past that student? Or if that happens, is that car that has to stop behind the bus going to slide into the bus or worse? And then you begin to accelerate. And when you accelerate, you know, are you spinning out and your wheels go into the ditch, or, you know, so you're doing this. So there was one morning, and I was, you know, it was my first or second year, and I was out where there's no trees, all farmland, doing just that. And from a distance, that probably looked like an insane person, stopping, going. And there was it was being patrolled by police, and they saw this behavior, and they circled back and pulled up behind, and I saw what was happening, and then they must have run the plates and then pulled alongside of me and said, so are we going to have school or not? So I didn't get a ticket, but you have to be careful checking the roads, because we did have a transportation supervisor who did get rear-ended one morning checking the roads and had to go to the hospital. So you do have to. So the people that are out there doing the work and going from building to building, you need, you know, they have to be careful too. So, yeah.
Very detailed, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that it is a robust process. It's not just sticking a ruler into the ground and saying it's as many inches of snow. And the buses and the facility conditions are important too. And probably what didn't come out in your presentation is that I know that I've seen over my time on this board is, you know, the personal commitment you have to making that decision. And I guess I'll use the word, the angst you go through about the call or the no call. So, you know, thank you and your team for, you know, the benchmark isn't making sure most of the kids can make it there or back. It's making sure all the kids can. And I know that's the lens you look through it in. So thank you. And good luck tomorrow morning.
Thanks.
So we are now at, there is nobody signed up for public participation on agenda items. So that's going to move us to a 5-minute break. If I'm going to recommend we move past the 5-minute break. We'll reserve the right to do it later. So that takes us, Mr. Dreyer, if you're ready, to the treasurer's report, sir.
If you ever want to know the roads between here and Sandusky, let me know. I can tell you that this morning. I appreciate Tom's text. On Friday at Rotary, I could say the top of a conversation and say, Randy, what's the over and under on Tom calling off school on Tuesday? And I said, I'm just happy I don't have to make that decision. It's a no-win. A couple of things before I get into my presentation, just information for the board. So really for Susan and Laura, as you know, start your term is required by statute that you attend open records training, Sunshine Law. I've already attended the training. Doesn't mean you can't do it either, but I've already attended on your behalf.
I'll let you do that.
Okay, but you're more than welcome to attend it, and all the board members are is written down as your designee for that training. But again, it's online if you want to take it. Feel free to do it. They haven't changed it in 10 years. It's the same examples over and over again, but it's there. And I do have the latest manual, which is not updated yet. There was a second item that I almost forgot. Yeah, I sure brought my notes up with me. Oh, just takes the call. You know, Patty and Brooke were talking about enrollment. And one of the hidden issues in this, and we've talked about the need to sometime redistrict, or when we got new families moving in, where are they going to go to school? And you know, we're transporting across town, and we're starting to see some pressure on the number of buses we have. And James and I are starting some conversations. We may have to start building some more bus purchases into our forecast. Not so, you know, obviously with student growth, but it's not just the growth, it's also the distance we're transporting, right? Since we are, I think Laura's pointed out, we're not really neighborhood schools, right? If you're transporting students all the way across town. So it's kind of a heads up that's going to be in conversation as I look at numbers, you know, going into the spring. And James and I will have those conversations. Tom will be, and Brooke will be looped in as we get there. But just kind of forewarning that the enrollments stuff that Patty and Brooke are trying to do to balance things has an impact on other things like transportation. I'm going to have kind of abbreviated report this month. Just want to kind of hit the financials. Appreciate Lori catching some typos for me. Appreciate that. And looking at the stuff, and Susan had some good questions. I talked in Finance Committee with Laura and Eric. These presentations are stuff I think you need to hear kind of at a minimum, right? There's a lot more that we can cover, but there's stuff that you think I should be emphasizing, please let me know, all right? Because I'm doing what I want to do unless you tell me otherwise. Kind of independent like that. So let me give you an update on the general fund. We're 50% of the way through the year. And we're at 90 cash days, which is a nice place to be if we just stay there. This is, again, you'll see our cash balances are dropping, but it's normal. It's just that 90 is kind of that benchmark where that's the recommendation where you could be. Again, what that really means is if you had no revenue, we can continue to pay bills for 90 days. Now, what's the chances of absolutely no revenue? You know, who knows? Sometimes the state, you know, something could happen. Again, our all other revenue that's being driven, the two biggest components of that are our kindergarten tuition and our investments. And our investments continue to be strong. We're seeing a little bit of, drop in there. That's just mainly due to our cash balance dropping, right? Interest rates are still good. There is some discussion that the Fed is looking at a halt on interest rate increases, which is good for borrowers, not necessarily good for our earnings at this point. Now, let's time this right so we pass the bond issue when we can sell bonds at a much lower rate. That's my dream. Maybe a fantasy, but one can always dream, right? We're 6.4% revenue year over year. And if you notice, we're at 46, almost 47% of our revenue. Our tax payment this spring, well, this late winter, that's the bigger portion. So that'll all catch up here in the next couple months, and we'll be back on track. That we'll have our third income tax payment here in a couple weeks, and that'll give you a real good sense of where we are with, again, remember back in October, well, actually November's report, our income tax, the withholding is really strong, but the other income tax was down. We're not sure what that means. The state is doing really, really well. They have another $500 million surplus this month, so they're doing well, which I think should bode well for us. On the expense side, we're right where we need to be at 3.5%. Expenses are running, I'll say positive to forecast. In other words, we're not spending as much, but we still have, expenses are not necessarily flat. We have supplementals and stuff that come in later. And just as tonight on the agenda, for example, you have staff who are moving on the salary schedule for education, and that shows up in January. So you see a little bit of bump up in salaries and that kind of thing. So I expect us to be less than 50% at this time of year, because there's a couple of things that drive that up higher in the second half of the year. So we're doing well. You know, if you look at the in the first column, you know, we're projecting a $4 million essentially surplus, and we're tracking right where we need to be to meet that, and maybe a little bit ahead. But I kind of want to not get our expectations up for a while. But now, starting next month, we'll start getting closer to the new forecast. I will be more bullish or as necessary about where we're going with that. So. You've seen this, our general fund cash balance at the end of the month, right where we expect to be, following our normal trend. Nothing unusual there. And actually the blue line, in an ideal world, that's where we'd be all the time, right? We'd stay at that level and not be down at the green, but that's not the way school funding works, and the fact that we have to go, and rightly so, ask the voters for revenue every 5 years or so. So you ask for revenue, we look good, then we spend that down and have to ask again. So come spring, we have some crucial conversations concerning that. Just broken record, last couple of months, we're in good shape. Everything's tracking as expected. And just the one thing, it doesn't impact this year. Negotiations are obviously starting here soon, and that'll be a big topic of conversation with all of you as we get direction going into that. And Don and I are working on the information and models for the board can provide us some good direction on where we need to be. Last thing I want to talk about, and then I'll sit down here. Just, our audit is done. We ended up with a clean audit. Just a couple of minor recommendations, and one that was interesting. And in fact, I talked at my treasurer's roundtable this morning. We found a little glitch in the state software. The auditor looks at one report, I look at another, and I think we look good, and they don't match, and they should match. And I think we finally figured out why, and so now it just gives me something else I have to look at. They're immaterial amounts, but the fact that they didn't match, right? And when I saw that, the auditor's comment says, don't worry, don't lose sleep over this. I've seen it in other districts, but as treasurers, we take it personally, even if it's not our fault, but because we want it to be perfect, at least on the numbers, because you know how it is, someone finds you're off a little bit, everything must be off, right? And that's not the case. So
again, as we talked about in finance, it's the state software, kind of the keyword. It's not it's software Perrysburg's using.
We now know what to look for. We now know what to look for. We have, I can't remember how many thousands of account lines. And when we get done with them, or we don't need them anymore, we make them inactive. But depending on what report you use, some reports use the inactive items in there, and that's what's creating the problem. And so we have to make sure I look at those things, and when we deactivate stuff and all that. But it was like no one even thought about it. But it's not a big deal. In fact, like I said, we'll get another clean audit, so we're good to go another year. I'll stop right there and see if there's any questions or comments. There's more, we're talking finance, but for this general discussion, I'll leave that for another time.
Great
Questions,
job.
comments?
Great job, Randy, on getting through the audit without any major dings. I know minor dings are common because of changes in state law and things like that. But no, great job.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine's a treasurer. She called me this morning. When I can tell, she always normally gets me when I'm already at work, but I was on the way in and she's mad. And I go, what's going on? She goes, 3rd year in a row, I got dinged for the same thing on my audit, and it's not my fault. And it was her gap compiler's fault, and she changed CPAs because of this mistake. It happened again. She goes, what am I going to tell my board? I said, all you can do is talk to them. It's not anything you've done wrong. It's just the fact is, and we're in a situation now with our auditor and financial statement compiler. They talk to one another, and if they find something, our auditors are really good about, hey, we found this, and your gap compiler didn't handle it the way we think they should. They'll talk, and as long as the financial statements have not been submitted, they'll allow them to fix it. Some auditors won't do that. They'll find a mistake and say, ha, 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 I caught it, when really what we're trying to do is make sure that they're right. So, anything else? Thanks, Laura. Appreciate that. All right.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, again, I echo Ms. Benke's comments about the clean audit, and congratulations to you and your team, Ms. Wells, sitting back there. You know, there's a lot of people put a lot of work into making sure that goes well all year. Buy you enough time?
Just give me a second.
You got it.
Laptop back up. Come on. There we go. Okay,
All right.
I'm ready.
On the agenda, we are at item 6.2, looking for a motion to approve the December financial statements.
So moved?
Ms. Larimer?
Second?
Ms. Roland Miller? Roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Ms. Roland Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Rufford,
Yes.
Ms. Minke,
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes, financial statements are approved. Next item, board committee reports and topics for discussion. To my knowledge, the only meeting that was held in the last week was the Finance Committee, which, unless you have anything to add, I think we've gotten a pretty good update on that. Okay. We will then move into the consent agenda. The consent agenda is covering items 9 through 12, which include the board minutes and some personnel actions, as well as some other organizational type matters. I am looking for a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Dr. Ruffert,
Second?
Ms. Larimer, any discussions or questions on the consent agenda? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Dr. Ruffert,
Yes.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Ms. Roland Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Minke,
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes, consent agenda carries. That takes us to item 13, board discussion on any new business.
I have some legislative updates for you. And I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. If you have any other questions, just let me know. Also, if you have any questions of something that you would like proposed to the House or the Senate, let me know. And if I can find out if it's down there or if we should do something, let me know. I'll help you with that. If you hear about something that you're wondering about, let me know, and I will do my best to look it up. But at the end of 23, Senate Bill 91 created some changes in handling the fraud. The 100th fraud conviction since 2019 just recently occurred. So the state auditor is increasing mandated reporting systems to report any alleged fraud attempts. So we all know how those mandates work on us, so I'm sure this falls on Randy's shoulders that he's got another mandated, unsupported reporting system to deal with. There is a call, and I use that in quotes, to the state. It was not defined under the conditions. Is that going to the state board or to the due department to determine the costs of the mandated fare bus bill from 1966, which requires us to have our buses go out of our district to take students to anywhere. And I think in one of James's reports years ago that we travel every day 2,000 miles. Who pays for that? We do. So there's somebody that is milling around down in the state and trying to find out what is the cost of that mandated bill, all the way from, I didn't realize it was from all the way from around 1966. It seems like a long time ago that it's affecting us pretty hard right now. I remember ECOT. Yes, and how do you pronounce his name, Tom? Lager? I say Lager? I don't know, but his first name is William. And A.G. Yost is trying to freeze his assets when his fraud to the state was discovered all the way back in 2001, as he had a deal with ODE to do unaudited enrollment reports. How appropriate after we had Patty's report tonight. So imagine if her reports were not audited and not, I mean, we get a report every month. And he was allowed to do unaudited reports and got caught in 2016. And ODE finally started auditing that. And in 1 year alone, he had over $60 million in fraud. Well, that's what it cost the taxpayers of Ohio. He's now up at a total of $100 million. And this fraud was basically due to the state having little to no regulation of charter schools. And it doesn't look like much of that will be recovered, but that's what A.G. Yost is working on as far as that case is. It's, even though we don't hear about it anymore, it's still brewing down in the back. Yes. And in case you hadn't heard, the State House voted 65-28 to override DeWine's veto of HB 68. And the Senate will be conferring on that on the 24th. And there's another bill that's coming up, HB 344. Let's keep our eyes open on this one. It's going to eliminate a replacement tax levy. Now, right now, that's only in the hearing stage, but Perrysburg has a replacement tax on the March, the March election. And this bill will also do changes in regarding to property tax valuation, complaints, and appeals, which affects us. So this one could become a hot under the collar issue. So that's going to be one that I'm going to be watching for. And then as much as Tom and I have giggled and commiserated with each other about maybe we dodged a huge bullet in not getting involved with the State Board of Education is being requested to move from their downtown offices all the way out to Reynoldsburg. Well, that's not sitting too well with them. And so they are in the middle of a huff and puff with the state, the new State Department, because it violates the state constitution. So you might hear a little bit about that. But it's kind of like, oh my gosh, cats and dogs, it's mayhem down there. And I wanted to let our new board members know, and you don't have to be a new board member. I mean, any of us can go to this, new board members, of the board member 101 class that OSBA puts on during a weekend. It's February 3rd and 4th. That's closest one to us in Findlay, at the Findlay Inn and Conference Center, which is a really nice place. I've been down there many times. And all you have to do is, well, we can let Randy know if you'd like to attend that. It is for the weekend. You can stay over if you want to, or for us, we can come back home and then go back down the next day. Excellent class, highly recommend it. And for you can just tell your treasurer, or you can sign up through OSBA, and your treasurer should that'll be paid for. I think it's $300 and some odd dollars, so it should be paid. That, I know we pay for it. I'm not sure about Rossford, but I'm sure they do. And that's it.
Mr. Bennington, may I address one thing I thought about? Last week, I think I emailed everyone about counterfeit cash. I don't want to go into details on what we're doing. You don't want to clue those who want to do it, but we were not isolated. That other athletic directors reported they've received similar.
Really?
Yeah, but the bank caught it, and Kelly and Tanya, our accountant, they went to the bank to actually inspect the bills themselves, so they knew what they were talking about. And they were actually, I said they were actually very good counterfeits. The bank said there was just handling it, you wouldn't have caught it. You had to know exactly what to look for, or to use the counterfeit marking pens. But we have Chuck Jaco and I talked through a procedure at the high school on cash collections, how to mitigate the risk. It's obviously it's not going to eliminate the risk, but and we followed up on it. And it ended up being $40 that was a hit against the gate receipts for the Pitt wrestling tournament.
Well, it was interesting because that very night that you sent out that email, there was a news report about some other fraud that happened in Toledo, much more than what happened to us. But I don't think it was counterfeit money, but there was another type of fraud scam that was going on. And of course, now I don't remember it, but I thought, oh, gee whiz, what's going on? There must be a ring of something going on right now, testing the waters to see what we'll fall for and what we won't. So how does that affect the new ruling that
Okay, we have to
that
take
was the
cash.
reason why we stopped taking cash at events like this, to
Right.
prevent embezzlement, which we don't want to go there again, and dealing with fraud and things, but now we're forced to take cash because of the state. Where's the happy balance there? Or, oh, he shrugs his shoulder, I asked a silly question, okay.
The state.
Can I just say amen, sister?
Okay.
You're preaching to the choir.
I preach
Yeah.
it to the choir, all right, hallelujah.
No, I think we have to recognize, I mean, the reason for it, I mean, we have certain, particularly our seniors, which I say that, and I actually won, but our seniors are not as plugged into the apps on their smartphones as the rest of us, and it created a problem in some places, and the legislature is trying to be mindful of that. And I think, if it becomes an issue, we may have to have our own conversations on how to deal with it. Now, here in Perrysburg, obviously, we have a program for our seniors to get athletic passes, so it should not be a huge issue. But it is going to be an issue in place to cash, and particularly at our football and basketball venues. There's a lot of potential cash that could flow through there. But,
I think it's also an income issue that people who are lower income have a harder time getting a credit card, have a harder time having other forms of payment. So I do think that there's some access for lower income people that's valuable in having cash, but obviously it does expose us to more risk. So, yeah, mitigate the risk as much as we can.
With those pens that you use, that you mark on a piece of paper money, would that would that have caught that?
yeah, it would
particular
have
issue?
caught it.
Oh, wow.
Kelly went out, in fact, as soon as and went to Office Max Staples. I don't know where we went, and she bought them out of whatever they had in their inventory. And we redistribute. These are a newer pen to all the buildings, and you get kind of instant results with them. You don't have to wait for the ink to fade like you did with the old ones.
Okay.
And so, we've also, Kelly and Tanya have gone out and done some training with some buildings on how to help identify that. Because it's not just, and some school districts are telling me they're seeing some come through their cafeteria too, students. So, again, it's not so much the dollar amount, it's just the other long-term issues, that could cause.
And sometimes it's just innocent. You don't know that it's that you received it and that you're passing it on. There's some amount of innocence in it. Okay, that's all I got.
I do have one thing I would like to mention. I received from a colleague who is a former wrestler, high school and college, and former wrestling coach, who wanted to give kudos to Perrysburg and the high school and the athletic department, the wrestling club, and everybody for a very well-run tournament that they had, invitational, at the first weekend in January. He says it's always put on, it's always very well-run, it's always very well-staffed, and he says it's always a great event to make sure that I let someone know. And I said I would bring it up at our next board meeting and make sure that it's on the record. But he said he goes to a lot of invitations, invitational still, and is very active in the wrestling community. And he says it's very highly regarded, so kudos
did he
to.
explain what we're doing that is so exceptional?
He just says it's very well run, it's very well organized, even down to the volunteers in the, in the concession stand. He just says everybody's very friendly, and it's just not a lot of time in between events. And he says it's just a very highly respected and just very, very well run. And he's not one to just come on out and compliment. And for him to find me and say that, knowing I'm on the board, I said I would make sure that everybody's receives
cool.
that. So kudos to wrestlers and families and everybody that was there for a job well done.
Mr. Hasso, I have received an interesting question recently. Maybe it's something that we could pull out into the next work session or the next February regular board meeting. It was a comment, I'll call it a comment about really not taking great care of our facilities, which kind of made me step back a little bit and say, wow, sitting on operations, being in the building, seeing the buildings, what is your grounding for that assessment? Well, all of this deferred maintenance that is out there that you're talking about. I'm like, wait, let me kind of be clear here that when the OFCC came out to take a look at the funding for the last bond issue,
Can you
one of
explain
the comments,
OFCC when
the
you say
Ohio,
that?
you're going to ask me the Ohio Facilities
Yep,
Commission. I'm missing a C in there.
thank you.
Thanks for calling me out on that.
Gretchen, that's a Gretchen Downs.
Yeah. But one of the comments they made was how well taken care of our operations staff have done with those facilities. But it started to get into a conversation of, well, we're paying for a PI levy, and where are those dollars going? And if you have a PI levy, why aren't those dollars being used to take care of all of this deferred maintenance? And it's like, yeah, okay, all very good questions. And I can understand where the questions are being driven from and where I'll call it confusion for lack of a better term. But I was hoping, since it is a question that this person had, and it's probably out there in the community, if that's something that we could hear a little bit more of in one of our upcoming meetings in February.
I noticed that a lot during the levy, that people don't really understand what deferred maintenance means. They think, they leap and say deferred maintenance, lack of maintenance, not doing maintenance. And it isn't, and that's what I put in one of the ads that I put out during the campaign, was that deferred maintenance is having a front door that really could use a coat of paint. But it's the summer and you don't want to do it, you want to go on your vacation, you'll do it when you get back. That's deferred maintenance. The fact that it's falling off of the hinges and is cracked and doesn't really lock anymore, that's lack of maintenance, and that's a totally different thing. And boy, we need to find a new name for that deferred maintenance thing. People don't
Some
seem to.
accountant's concept
Yes,
right
yes.
Well, I think it was in the OFCC report, and I know we did talk about it as a board, so I think if we pull that back out, Mr. Bennington, that's a great point.
I think that's what we've seen it before.
We
can talk to it.
understand.
We've had Mr. Mapus come in and tell us what we're doing with the PI dollars and those really critical things, how those are being addressed.
Right.
But
But it's not deferred maintenance, and when we looked at those numbers, it was a lot of, if we were going to upgrade a building, then you had to do a lot of ADA accommodations because you were updating or renovating a piece of the building, so that goes into the law. But I think if we have that conversation or bring that up again about what OFCC says is deferred maintenance, but how we also received compliments on how well taken care of our older buildings are, kind of explaining that.
and the PI dollars and how they're just
Yes,
not
and how
enough
they're
to-
used. And I think along with that one, I had a question too, you know, because they know that my history of in Perrysburg schools with Lucas and preschool, and I had some people ask me questions about preschool. You know, well, why would they want to make Frank into a preschool, and why are you so all about preschool being brought back into the building? I said, well, by law, somebody said preschool is not required. You don't have to have a preschool. I said, well, that's not true. By law, we have to educate students that have special needs or identified as having a special need at the age of 3 and on. And by law, we also have to add services for peers because they have to have peer partners or peers in their classes with students identified with a disability. So there's a lot of misunderstanding of preschool as a requirement for students with disabilities. So it's not just something that we want to have, even though we can go into the research and I won't go, that's my soapbox. But, you know, understanding that it is by law, we do have to have preschool. So for somebody to say that it's not required, it's just something we want to do, I think that is, you know, maybe understand what the law is.
Old school.
That's very old school. It's not daycare. It's actually required by law. And anyway, if we, you know, just kind of bring up, when we hear questions like that in the conversations I have, just kind of correcting the false information that's out there.
I do know, I think we're not, I have some dates and they're tentative, so we'll be putting them in the messenger and distributing them out. But we are going to schedule specific building tours in the evening so people can actually get into the buildings. So we have Monday, February 5th, we'll start at Fort Meigs, and that'll be evening so people can get there. February 8th, which is a Thursday, we'll be at Frank, and then Toth is tentatively scheduled for Tuesday, February 13th, and Woodland on Thursday, February 15th. So the idea is to actually get the folks who might want to see the buildings inside, and also have the custodian, the principal, James, our director of operations there, to kind of walk through what that deferred maintenance is. Because, you know, I know there's a letter to the editor that's coming out in the messenger about this topic. So, and with OFCC, the term deferred maintenance, it is something that you know, OFCC funds say things like, if you have a membrane roof, which is a flat roof that's rubberized, you need to, if it's 7 years or older, you need to replace that. That's classified as deferred maintenance. It's not that we've let the roof go. In fact, we have a schedule. We can tell you exactly when those roofs, boilers are expected to be replaced. It's complying with that. So that the terminology is something I think that folks want to exploit, frankly. Because if you do get into our buildings, they're in very good shape. And, you know, as you pointed out, people who evaluate buildings for the commission took time out to say what our buildings were. So,
What time are those tours going to be?
I don't have that. I want to say it's 6 o'clock, but there's a couple question marks here, so I didn't include it in my report because we're still pinning down at the building level. But so those are the kinds of things that we want to do, is give people an opportunity to come in and take a look and see. To your example, which was good, your analogy, you know, is the door broken and hanging on a hinge? And you won't find that in any of our buildings. But you know, it's things that we need to take care of, and we do. And yeah, so people's furnaces last 25 years. Maybe you can get 30 years, but at some point you need to replace those in some of our boilers. That doesn't mean you as a homeowner are not taking care of that furnace. It's just the lifespan you need at some point to replace it. And there are some pieces of equipment that were there. And we do have a schedule, but the $1.5 million is a lot of money that comes in from the PI. But when you start to put it up against roofs and boilers, it doesn't go very far. And that 1.5 million is what they collected in the 1980s. It went really far.
Right.
But today, that same dollar amount doesn't stretch, so.
Unfortunately, too bad we can't get them to get a real life experience of them seeing how many kids, we can't bring them in during the day where they can see, how many kids are in the cafeteria and what the lineup is for the restroom if there's only so many stalls for the girls. And too bad we can't. Well, maybe we could. Have somebody walk around with the GoPro on and blur out other people's faces so they can see what it's like traveling out to the portable and things like that. Kind of a real life, put on one of the facility dogs and let them, walk around and, and see. But,
In a
what it's
portable on a
like.
0-degree day, yeah.
Well, what it's like. I mean, gosh, I avoided that at all costs. But yes, thank you.
Yeah, we'll definitely put some things together.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, is there any other new business anyone would like to bring up? Hearing none, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
What about public participation?
Oh, we have no one signed up for the last
For
section.
the
Thank
last
you.
one either, okay.
Thank you for keeping me honest there, Ms. Larimer.
Not a problem.
All right. You want a motion? So moved.
Dr. Reffert, Ms. Larimer? Roll call, please.
Dr. Reffert,
Yes.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Ms. Minke,
Yes.
Ms. Rowland Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes, we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Stay warm.